Before we welcome Brandon, we want to start briefly with Dr. Ben Houltberg, Director of Research for USC's Performance Science Institute, which researches and teaches high-performance mindset. Ben is a former collegiate runner turned developmental scientist who is widely published on topics such as socialization of emotion regulation, promoting resilience through adversity, and the importance of healthy identity development and emotional well-being for high performance. He also conducts applied research to train entrepreneurs, athletes, and community members. He recently developed and completed programs for the Seattle Seahawks and has ongoing programs with USC Athletics. A few years ago, Simon Sinek actually was here. He had a viral TED Talk, if you ever want to see it, in a book that said "Start with Why." His whole talk was about starting with why, which examined why the most successful companies had a purpose beyond just making products or making money. By the same token, we as individuals want to find purpose, something that gives deeper meaning to our work and our lives. And this is the perfect way to kick off and frame our semester. Please welcome Dr. Ben Houltberg. Ben.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. I love being in the classroom. It's one of the things I feel most passionate about. And I'm really excited for this course and where you are right now in this point in history. Because right now there's no better time, I think, ever than to start something new. To figure out what you care about, to get connected to what's going on in the world, and say, what do I want to create? What do I want to make? Who do I want to be in this world? Even by the end of my conversation today, some of you might even fact check me, because we can get technology. We're inundated with information and facts, and it's helpful for us in our pursuits. And people are accomplishing incredible things right now. And I have the opportunity to work with people who have accomplished things beyond what they even thought they could ever imagine. But there's a shadow side to it. Being so connected in today's society, where you have access to what everybody else is doing. You're going to see incredible speakers come up here today and also throughout this course. And you're going to see that they've made millions of dollars and accomplished incredible things. And the first thing we often say when we see this is we think to ourselves, well, can I do that? Or we compare ourselves and think, well, I want to be able to do that. And what we see today, and in today's society especially, we're seeing a rise in mental health issues. More and more people are anxious. They're more depressed. There's a higher pressure to perform because there's an endless amount of comparisons that you can make across social media, across the world now. This pressure to perform becomes really critical for us to think about. Because when there's this high pressure to perform, and we think that somehow if we can just be successful, then I'll feel good about myself. Wait, if I just get my degree, then I'm going to feel good about myself. When I make my first $1 million, or I get my first investment, or I win my first gold medal, I'll feel fulfilled. The problem with that approach is that people pursue a goal without ever really thinking about why they're pursuing that. And what happens is, in my studies and other studies, is people who fail, or they do not perform up to what they wanted, they feel this sense of shame. Because what happens is they begin to put their worth and value as a human being in the results of something. And when you have this performance-based identity, something that I study a lot of with high-achieving athletes to CEOs to performers across different domains, people start to compete not to fail instead of putting themselves out there and seeing how much they can grow. The fear of failure becomes so great. And so this becomes something I got really interested in. And I could talk about what happens when we have this fear of failure, or we think if going into a test we experience performance anxiety because we're more afraid of not performing for some reason. It impacts our cognition. It impacts our ability to carry out the motor skills for athletes and sports. And it gets in the way. But what's even worse for someone with performance-based identity is they actually accomplish what they set out to accomplish. And when they get there and they're standing, I'll talk about the group that I've studied. They're standing with the gold medal around their neck. And their hope and their desire was, when I stand on that podium, it will define my life and it will make me feel good about myself. And then they wake up the next day and it feels good to win. We all want to win. There's nothing wrong with winning. But they experience what's called now the Olympic blues. Countless athletes experience the highest levels of depression after the greatest moment of their accomplishment. Why is that? I became fascinated with it, and I experienced it as an athlete, and devastation of going through difficult times and depression and anxiety. And I think a big reason is because they don't have a good sense of purpose. So when I study this idea of purpose, I'm going to talk about it just for a moment, but I want you to think about this for your own life, is that athletes who I studied and performers who I studied who had a strong sense of purpose, and they had this, what I call a purpose-based identity, they had the same fuel that woke them up every morning. They, in fact, won more gold medals, won Olympic medals in this group. They can make more money. But the drive behind the pursuit is very different. They don't see the result as being the definition of who they are. Now, there's no doubt that your result of competition or of a venture that you're setting out for is not an expression of your hard work, of your commitment, of the grind. You've got to do all of those things, but it does not define you as a human being. So those who have a sense of meaning in their life, they understood their values of what they were pursuing, could pursue it with the same vigor, but they had the freedom to put it all out there and be resilient when they failed. Because failure was just an opportunity for them. How do I get better? How do I tweak this? How do I change this? Because I know who I am, and I know what I can do. And so I'm only going to lean into it more. So the drive looks very, very, very different, but we don't spend enough time in this space of understanding what purpose is. Let me tell you real quickly what purpose is. I won't take up too much time. Let me, because I will keep going if you let me. But let me tell you why I want to talk about purpose. It's not just your why. It's not just a goal, but there's 3 elements of the science of purpose that have to be there for it to be purpose. The first one is that it has to be personally meaningful to you. If you're just pursuing something that has no meaning and you can't find intrinsic value to it, it will leave you empty. When it connects to something deep and meaningful, then you will find that you can pursue anything. There's a great quote that says, "Those people who have a clear why to live can endure almost any how." This comes from a guy named Viktor Frankl, a psychologist, wrote a book called A Search for Meaning, Man's Search for Meaning, who happened to be Jewish at the wrong time in history. And he was put in a Holocaust camp at the height of his career as a psychologist, and he endured the evils of what humanity can be. And he talks about how he could transcend that through meaning making. And he created this whole idea of how do we endure? When you have a why and you have a personal meaning, you can get through anything. You can get through difficult times. And life is hard. Life sucks sometimes. You lose people. I've lost way too many people in my life. I've seen too much death. I've experienced divorce. I've experienced challenges in my life. That's life. But when you can find something deeper and meaningful, that's intrinsic value. So the first thing you have to have with purpose is personal meaning in your pursuit. The second thing you have to do is you have to actually be taking action. Because if you say you value something, but you're not moving towards it every day, you're going to experience anxiety. If you say you're about relationships, if you say you're about commitment, if you say you're about respect or loyalty, but you're not living it every day, you're going to feel disconnected. And so the second thing that purpose is it's a goal pursuit. It's moving towards something. It's taking action every day. The third thing is critical, and I want to finish with this, is purpose always involves something beyond yourself. It's not just about you. What contribution are you going to make to your community? How are you going to impact those around you? When things get really, really, really hard, what do you turn to? For me, I think about my boys. I got a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. I love what I do, and I'm passionate about what I do because giving people purpose makes our society better, which makes a better world for my kids. That'll get me every time because it's meaningful. It's beyond myself. What is meaningful to you that's bigger than yourself? We rarely step out of that. You can impact people right now with who you are, and nobody else's success threatens your unique purpose. When we find purpose, it creates a mindset that allows us to endure, and it strengthens our habits, and it gives us motivation, and it helps us to pursue goals not at the cost of your relational and emotional health. So my encouragement to you is as you see people, you hear their incredible stories, don't just look for don't just look for habits that they do. Don't just look for the techniques that they used or how they got to where they were. Look for where their meaning and their purpose is. And then start thinking about that as you frame your purpose for the upcoming year. So,
Some questions.
questions? Yeah.
I have millions of questions. I love this.
What would you tell your 22-year-old self if you could?
That's a really great question. I would say you are enough. You're worthy. You have value. You don't have to prove that. Start there and see what can happen. Yeah.
How do you know that you've found your purpose, or that you're not just kind of lying to yourself?
That's a great question too. Purpose is it feels big if I say, what's your purpose in life? That's a big question. But so first of all, I would say finding purpose is always a pursuit or a process. You know you're in your purpose when you start to just, I think when you're in your purpose, you'll start to experience a range of emotions. It brings you happiness and joy. It might make you cry. But it means something to you it's in here. You feel it. You understand it. I'll just say also another thing that I think is one of the most powerful motivators in the world is when pain becomes purpose. When our struggle, our personal struggle becomes something we want to contribute now to society and make society better. And what I see in love is when an athlete or somebody begins to transform their pain to purpose, and they're unstoppable at that point. And so sometimes our pain points, if we have the courage to chase it, and sometimes that means going to therapy. I'm a licensed therapist, and so I'll always talk about therapy as a good thing. We can understand where those pain points are, and it can help us feed our purpose. Yeah. I think there's always points where you feel disheartened in the journey of purpose. There's always adversity. There's always challenges. But for me personally, when I come to those places, I have to step back and I have to really come back to it. Often when I get disheartened or I start to lose motivation, I have to really say, am I really taking action every day towards that purpose? Because a lot of times I had to change careers even after a while because I was doing 80% of things that just didn't bring me any fulfillment. And they weren't using my strengths. And so I had to make a change in my life to be better aligned because Purpose is an amazing thing individually. When it becomes you live in a community of purpose, when you have shared purpose with people around you, that helps sustain you as well. Because it's not an individual effort either. Yeah.
Any more questions? So I want to make sure we cover that thoroughly. So if your identity and your self-worth is tied to achievement, I'll be happy with myself when I get the grade, get the girl, get the guy, make a partner, make this amount of money. Turn your mic on. You're not going to live a happy life. I wish I knew that at your age. Like, seriously. That's a game changer.
Yeah.
How many, I mean, you guys are like perfect scores and high SATs and high ACTs. You guys are extremely talented. And you got a lot of pressure on you. And so you may naturally compare yourself to those metrics, and it's a losing proposition. That's really a bummer to learn. But it's important that you learn it sooner rather than later. What other sort of key takeaways do you want them to have from this talk and as you lead into your class?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that we often do, people that feel overwhelmed by this idea of purpose, because it can feel overwhelming at times, is just to step back, and we do this with our program with the athletes, to step back and just start to evaluate what you really value, like what's most meaningful in your life. What is it that really brings you meaning in your life? Whether it's family, whether it's friends, whether it's art, whether it's athletics, whatever it is, and then start to dig deeper on what that is. And the more you can start to align up what brings you value and meaning to what your vision is for what you want to become, then you start to see some traction. But no, it's a process. It takes time, and it takes. The hard part is that I think I discovered my purpose more and more in the most devastating times of my life, because I think it requires you to do that. So I would, and then also don't try to do it alone. And sometimes you have to put people around you that also know what your purpose is, and you share that with them, and they become champions of that purpose in the community where it's safe to be in. And there's other people who are detractors, and you have to be aware of that as well. Yeah.
What do you do with them?
I have a hard time with this because I came from where I grew up. It's like you're just loyal to your friends, and so I've had to do this. And I think you have to be really honest and say, to be honest, like I feel like I'm giving a lot of energy to you, but I really don't feel like you've been here to support me. And I think you start to figure out who has your back. And if you are just giving all the time in a relationship and there's not a mutual, it's not a good relationship. And I think that's what I had to do, is just start to be honest with myself and know that my time is valuable now, and I have to make sure the people in my tribe and in my circle are people that I'm intentional about. And then you have family sometimes that you don't get to choose too. But yeah, I think that's an important part of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are people around you. You get older in life, they're energy drainers. You have to look at who's an energy drainer in your life. Mark Burnett used to call them energy drainers. And you got to make some cuts. As you go in life, you figure out who's the closest people, family, who are outside circles that gets outside, and sometimes you just got to make changes. Someone put this to me in a good way the other day. I was expressing how I was having difficulty with somebody in a work environment, and it wasn't healthy. And so he said, think of the sands going through the hourglass. That person is in that hourglass with you, stuck in there. Do you want to spend any more time with him or her? I was like, no. It was just so clear to me.
Yeah.
So there's just times like I'm really excited to learn more about field, about purpose-based identity. We're probably going to have him come back a couple times, and let's thank Ben Houltberg.
Yeah. Thank you.